It's great that so many of you have dragged your human bodies in here to fill your brains once more with interesting brainstorming on beneficial general intelligence. So we're sort of at a midpoint and transitional phase of the event now. We've had a bunch of great talks and panels and have a couple more to come still. And we've had some unconferencey brainstorming sessions already in the last couple of days, but then today and tomorrow the balance is shifting a bit, and we're doing mostly sort of decentralized brainstorming stuff, and having that balance was important to me in conceiving the event as a whole. I mean, I think it's still cool to see people get up on stage and explain what they've been doing and thinking. I think there's still a role for that. On the other hand, we have YouTube and other such venues now by which we can see people give talks, and I think that, you know, the unique value of this sort of event, in the end, it's always in having lunch or dinner with someone or randomly talking in the hallway. But doing these semi-structured unconference and fishbowl and other sorts of things, we're trying to capture some of that energy of random conversations in the hallway and over lunch, but just stretch it out over more time. And you know, the result of that will be hopefully some cool ideas and directions popping up concretely in the next couple of days. But probably more importantly, I'm hoping just the various folks here will establish bonds and connections and then communication channels, and then we'll be able to keep the dialogues and the co-creation going after the 4 days of the event. So that the specifics of how the unconference sessions will be structured, I think Pam or someone else will go over in detail after the panel, or Haley will go over in detail a little later after the panels are done. But I mean, the basic concept is, for the unconference sessions, anyone can propose a topic, and a bunch have already been written down on the pieces of paper taped on the wall back there. Anyone can propose a topic, and we will then ask people to associate locations with those topics, and then whoever wants to discuss the labeled topic at the given location can go there and do it. And I think a spreadsheet is being circulated, which is supposed to be an electronic version of the same thing up on the wall. And it's all can be quite fluid. I mean, of course, if a few people go off in the corner and discuss something that's not in the labeled unconference session, we have no unconference police force who's going to stop you.
We can't emerge it.
If a conversation doesn't seem to be gelling, there's no shame in just vaporizing it and going to join other discussions. It also isn't bad if half of the conference ends up in one discussion or something, right? So I mean, the point is to make it fluid and self-organizing rather than rigid. And I've been involved in a few different unconference type events before. At its best, it can work spectacularly well. So I mean, with the amazing crowd we have here, we'll probably be near the better end of the spectrum, right? So I'm excited about this portion of the event at least as much as about the cool talks that we've had. And now we have the first panel, which is on principles for decentralized global community, which I think Bill will briefly introduce. But this is a super important topic. I mean, if we get the AGI code right, and we have an AGI system which is able to be taught to be beneficial and loving and helpful to people. You know, if the ownership and governance and control of that AGI is not done right, then all that work on programming and teaching the AI may ultimately not lead the result we want, right? So it's a super important topic, and I'm really glad we have a number of people here who've been thinking deeply about this topic for a while.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll give a hand to Ben, if you don't mind. And also to our sponsors, Net through AGI, Hypercycle had a great party last night, and Sophia Verse as well. And it is great to see such a big crowd here. I heard some people were up to 2 a.m. or even 5 a.m. last night. So that's late for me, and probably many of you. And besides being brilliant minds, it's wonderful to see how many great musicians and dancers we have in the audience. I get to be here, I get to introduce a couple of panels to you this morning, and I'm really thrilled to do so. Our next moderator, Mihaela Lieru, as proof that she is an amazing chief AI alchemist, and she'll present her panel. I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for her. I met her in 2019 in Las Vegas, and 4 months later, she introduced me to Ben Goertzel in 2020. And now it's much of my life is invested in the Singular Internet ecosystem 2 spin-offs later. So many thanks from me to her, because I'm so grateful to be here and be meeting all of you and be working with Ben Goertzel as well. So, Mihaela, would you like to come up?
저 사람은 소피아 벌스.
저 사람이?
소피아 벌스의 주인은 데이비드 레이크하고 저하고 두 명 더 있어요. 그 주인이고 그 사람은 이제 여기서 오디오, 비디오 뭐 이런 거
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And yes, after dancing, and of course, it's so tempting because, as Ben was saying, that's the whole point of decentralization, to cluster in ad hoc groups. And from those ad hoc clusterings, something amazing emerges. So we are going to discuss about principles. I do not know. I believe we have those principles embedded in being, as you know from my talk yesterday. So I'm going to invite my panelists here. You can see what they do, but in order to tell you who they are, it will take me much more than the panel duration, which I even do not know how long it is anymore because we started a bit late. So please come join me on the stage, dear panelists. Thank you so much. And maybe you have seen the program. There was a last-minute change to our panel. I invited Professor Robin Hanson on the panel. And I've done this because I had 3 intuitives on the panel, and I think with me, it's a bit more, I think I'm more in between. So Robin, with his prickly symbol there, is going to counterbalance the intuitive part with
돌릴까요?
I thought it would be good to introduce an element of chaos in the panel. So as you see the topic here, yesterday I finished my presentation with, and of course I guess you did not have any chance to look at them. I'm going just to start with the first question, and also with a remark that we did not choose the questions which have been given to us for the panel. I have no idea who created them. So my panelists may just simply rephrase them, and I give them the complete freedom to rephrase them. So we have some technical difficulties, which will take a long time to read. So, and therefore I'm going to read the first question. What principles might meaningfully be adopted by a decentralized global community to guide progress toward beneficial AGI? Can we please have the slide here? Okay, so that question, I will direct it to Robin. I think he has seen so far, because we could see here the slide, but we cannot see that. So if you want, you can start to comment on them. Maybe they will put them on some point. Maybe they make no sense, and that's why they came from.
Is this working?
No, is it flipped on?
Maybe the microphones
Hello?
were also until 5 a.m.
So I can see these principles even though you can't, but since I go first, I get to take the easy ones. And so I would suggest the first two obvious principles of decentralization are, one, there's a vast space of possible ways to decentralize. We should be searching that space, so try lots of stuff. Would be the first principle of decentralization. Try a lot of different possible ways to decentralize. There's not just one obvious way, there's a lot of things to try. That's the first principle. And the second one pretty much follows from the first. Hold high standards to the stuff you try. Just because it was you who tried it doesn't mean it's great. Hold it to high standards of what is it achieving compared to all the other options that you might be able to generate, and try.
They can see them now.
All right, now. So I think that's not in contradiction with any of those. And I'll hand it off to everyone, the rest of you.
That's fine. So actually what I wanted to say about these principles is, I gathered them, a minimal set just as a guiding for our conversation today. But of course, this is our lifetime work, I guess, to come up with them. But I think these are like no-brainers, and they all rely on decentralization. So if Agiga would follow them, I think we would have a better world. But we do not know if this is possible. So I would like to ask now, maybe Sharon, do you want to rephrase the first question?
I don't want.
But they don't want you. So.
I don't want.
Hi.
Yeah.
So good morning everyone, and thank you for being here and inviting us. So when you talk about decentralization, we understand that this is about governance. And when we look at life as the leading force in evolution, I hear my echo, right? There's an echo. No.
Only you hear the echo.
Okay, so we see different human societies, right? You have the governance, you have the economy, you have the structure. Right? So when you talk about economy, like when you live with your parents, so this is not decentralized, right? But when you go to the party, it's very much decentralized. So every community has different means to apply governance. Now we see how technology advances, and therefore we need to adapt. So if it is about now rephrasing the question, it's really about how we can also apply indigenous knowledge, how we can reconnect to nature, okay? How we connect HI with AI to reach NI, nature intelligence, right? That's the ultimate goal, to reconnect with nature, with our inner self, and this is why AI and to connect with each other, if you look at the advancement in communication technologies aligned with the evolution of our consciousness, this is exactly what you see, right? That it's aligned and we have to adapt. And this is what's happening now. Everything is beautiful and perfect, and we are adapting, and there is a beautiful diversity. And
yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, and I just want to say that Edward Frankl, I don't know if you know him, the famous mathematician. He wrote about mathematics and love, and actually he was saying that beauty, and it's not only him, he was citing many other scientists. Beauty is organically within us, and it manifests when you make a mathematical discovery, and I experienced that, like the eureka moment, and it's the same experience you have when you fall in love. So, and he explained it more mathematically, but anyway, I think it's very much attuned to what you are saying there, and I know it, if I have to, but I don't have to prove it. So, I can move on to the second question which was given to us, unless the panelists have some more comments, please.
Yes, I'd like to add to that and give perhaps a very practical response to this question, because I've worked in DAOs, decentralized organizations, for many years. I've been part of the founding of them, creating governance for that, creating the architecture for that. And what we found very important with DAOs is the first principle is empowered participation, and the other one is also being able to tokenize and reward contributions. What you're seeing then is that DAOs give unique tools in order to align the collective intelligence around the very principles that we're speaking about here. And because it facilitates empowered participation by voting on proposals, but these proposals of course are completely transparent because the blockchain is transparent by design. What you see is that there's a lot more collective creativity emerging around that, and a sense of ownership then also, which I think is really important if you want to have these ethical kind of consciousness or stewardship around the development of beneficial AGI. Then it's really the culture and the quality of the community within which that process takes place that's also going to reflect on the way that technology is then ethically informed and value driven.
Thank you so much.
One final addition. I come from a background in research and career development, and one of my go-tos is to think about organizations from the perspective of the individual and their capacity to express themselves through their work. So I feel that when we're thinking about how to build these collaborative structures, it is profoundly important to allow and create spaces for people to realize their potential in the organization, whatever that means for them. So there need to be multiple avenues through which they can do this means of self-expression. And if they are empowered to do that, it feeds into the crowd and generates more power than existed before. So it becomes more than the sum of its parts.
Yes, fantastic. And this, of course, encompasses all the principles which are here, which are minimal, but of course, within organizations, especially I mean, it's important not to have centralization of organization, but that has to be relaxed to the extent to which gives us that space. Okay, I would move to the next question unless someone has something very urgent to say. And this is an interactive panel, so you can also kind of raise your hands if you have some comments to the questions. But I will move to the next question, because at least I don't see one thing. So the next question, which was given to us again, is what practical strategies can be implemented to promote collaborative efforts among diverse stakeholders? And I think, Esther, you already started, so I think maybe if you want to continue.
Thank you. That's a tricky question, isn't it? Because there are plenty of stakeholders who already have quite a big say in AI technology, right? So the AI companies themselves are stakeholders. They have quite a big influence on the direction. But most people in the world don't have any agency over where AI is going. And I think that it's really important to find ways to include them as well. Almost everybody on the planet is affected by AI. And pretty soon that will be everybody on the planet affected by AI, whether it's AGI or the multiplication of many narrow AI solutions, and whether that's directly affected by AI or indirectly affected by AI. Because of that influence, and because of the wide influence of AI, we could consider AI to be a commons property. So we could think of AI as being a resource, or think of it in terms of a resource that people should be able to govern themselves or contribute to the governing of globally. So when we talk about practical strategies, the commons framework is really helpful in that because it gives a set of concrete principles that allow us to organize and historically have given us a precedent for organizing. For example, local rules for local groups, so that we're not enforcing global rules in inappropriate circumstances. And it is naturally decentralized. So decentralized doesn't mean structureless, it just means that there is a distribution of power. And I think that things like the commons model could be really helpful in democratizing governance of AI.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? And anyone else here? Please, Julia. I need a microphone if you can circulate. Okay, thank you. And also, maybe from when I ask the question and they start to answer, please raise your hand so we kind of gauge the intervention.
Yes, I think this is a cool discussion, and I keep coming back to that first one, but I think this applies to all of them, which is greatest happiness for most, so maximize positive conscious experience and reduce suffering. My concern is that, not even a concern, it's just sort of a question or wondering, which is if we're currently using a time frame to calculate when the positive conscious experiences, over what amount of time the conscious positive experiences are maximized. And that time frame for most of the world is a shorter time frame, just for example, which I think it may be. How does that impact the rest of the evolution of the AGI? In other words, the question is almost like a basic question about decentralization, which is if you decentralize when a culture is not
Ripe enough?
Ripe enough or not thinking long term enough, what are the disasters that can ensue, and can you, through some kind of decentralized developmental process, can you change that?
Robin, can you take that?
No.
Okay.
I had a comment on her comment, which was just one of the biggest powers in civilization forever has been in the division of labor. So we definitely don't want everyone to speak up equally on everything. We want to be very selective about when we allow a much wider participation and on what axes. So that's the key hard question of design. If you want a wide participation, along what dimensions exactly would that be? It can't be on most of the detailed dimensions because then you don't have a division of labor that doesn't work.
Yeah, we've seen that in DAOs as well. But when you have a DAO that requires everyone to vote on everything, the participation is extremely low. So we wouldn't be able to do that, replicate that. It would be a disaster.
Thank you. This is where governance, hierarchical governance design for DAOs is really important. So what we've done in our DAOs to avoid that question, that problem, is to decentralize also the way people can vote, for example, in specified circles and topics, so that it also remains meaningful. So I think if we are talking about decentralization, we shouldn't use it as a solution for everything. There's a lot of precision in how do we create the appropriate governance through decentralization that also then ensures that there is an alignment again and a coordination that's around that collective intelligence potential and not just letting everyone do whatever they want.
And I think that's a good time for Sharon to rephrase the question.
I don't think it's about rephrasing, it's about really understanding that the system is upgrading and we need to adapt culturally. And of course, diversity is the key, something we keep repeating here. And you see, like in education and healthcare, always it is that we grow and learn and evolve through, studying diseases or sick parts of societies. So, for example, if you talk about decentralization global, it's not going to happen everywhere. Imagine it happens in refugee camps. Imagine it closes socio-economical gaps and help the poor out of the poverty for a start. So this is how I would see it. It's a process. Trust the process the trust.
Thank you. Absolutely. And so this, I think, leads us naturally to the other question, which was Suram that asked. But if there are any comments from the audience, please. We need a microphone in the back. Anyone? Around here. Okay, do that, gentleman. Okay, or sorry, two. didn't see you well.
No worries, no worries. Thank you. And thanks to the panel and to you, Michaela, for moderating. But I also wanted to say that there's a question of the interface between decentralized efforts and the existing culture and society. People have used DAOs as an example of how to organize decentralized efforts, but in fact, DAOs have been used to avoid accountability with respect to the existing culture and legislation in jurisdictions, and also as a result of that, there are members of DAOs who are all now held legally liable for things when things go wrong. And so, can you address this question of the interface between decentralization and the incumbent culture?
Yes, and I will start. Sorry, Carlos, and then you're next. Because so, and I completely agree with Greg. That was exactly the ethos of DAOs. Yes, because the idea was to free people from the chains of the centralized governance and governments. So that's why they were designed like that. But I think the answer lies maybe in the ethical principles. I don't know if we can move to the next question, but if anyone else, and of course, the question is, I think, if I may rephrase it, well, how about now when they try to evade even the decentralized culture? Even if the most, if they try to do evil as DAOs, I think that's where the weakest link would be.
Yeah, just a quick legal perspective on that. Indeed, a lot of DAOs initially were formed for people because they didn't want to be in centralized control. Then the challenge, of course, with a lot of court cases out of the US was that there was no limited liability protection for the members of those DAOs. And if you're not a registered, incorporated kind of partnership entity, that means that any member of the DAO will be held legally responsible if something goes wrong. There's a lot more awareness among DAOs now. We have, of course, Marshall Islands being very supportive for DAOs, in Liechtenstein as well, there's many other jurisdictions. And in terms of answering what is then the interface between more centralized forms of governance and DAOs, I'll give an example from Mauritius, where we actively gave input in the DAO Act from the Mauritius Financial Services Commission, the FSC, in order to help them understand the unique qualities and ways of operating of DAOs and how that could eventually also lead to DAO policies. You can there already incorporate it also as an LLP and other forms. So I think we're just at the forefront now where there is more real interaction starting to happen also with governments around thinking what is the way in which DAOs can be really acknowledged as very valuable forms of citizenship, participation, contribution.
Yes, thank you so much, but you see still the anarchist in me, and I know there are a few of us in the room, kind of, so you want to centralize me again and be accountable to who, so that's a point. So Robin, save us.
I'll just point out how this illustrates my initial point. There's a vast space of possible decentralized things. You shouldn't like them just because they're decentralized. Look at a vast space of alternatives, hold up the best ones that hold high standards, reject the rest.
Anyone else? David Wood, please, we need a microphone to David.
Thanks. I'd like to get back to the point that Julia was raising about having utilitarianism right at the beginning of this whole discussion. Because haven't we all learned from Sam Bankman-Fried and the terrible things that happened with FTX and effective altruism, that if you say you're calculating the greatest happiness for most, you end up often justifying all kinds of bad behavior because you say, well, I'm going to make lots of money and it's going to generate the greatest happiness for the most people. Now, here you start off by saying all of these are no-brainers. I just want to ask, is there still some concern about having utilitarianism front and foremost in this panel?
I'm not sure I'm reading them like this. See, that's the question. because these principles are to be taken together, you see. So autonomy, yes, I mean, unless it infringes on the freedom of others and breaks the principles, but also the legacy, yes, so we can anticipate what will happen in the future, you know, so we would have known that Semba, that free, wants to screw us also.
May I interject? So human society.
Because you asked me, that's okay.
So human societies is not just about governance, it's also about economies, and it's about what we measure. If we just measure financial capital, then okay, I see you. But I'm sure you all have heard about the 8 forms of capital: nature capital, intellectual capital, knowledge capital, social human capitals, experiential capital, spiritual capital. A new language is a new consciousness, and this is how we can lead ourselves, okay, with AI as an extension of who we are, and toward, you know, a better future for all of us. And this is why we are here. We want right to reach, you know, to be more happy. You know, we want to be more wise. We want to be more compassionate.
Not necessarily all. Very few raise their hands and they want to be more wise. But I just wanted to make the word.
Yes, there's an interesting paradox and tension in utilitarianism. Also, this showed up with beneficial AGI or benevolent AGI. But the paradox is this, in my view, because we talk about reducing suffering. We are now in a tipping point time in terms of climate tipping points, planetary tipping points, social tipping points. So we are in a time of great suffering, and it's not going to get much easier soon. And so if the focus is just on immediately maximizing our happiness, and this might also be what has gotten us into trouble in some ways, if the happiness perception is a materialistically driven orientation. So perhaps if the focus is on the maturation of our species, so that we are mature enough and wise enough as a species that we can actually actively guide the development of benevolent and beneficial AGI, that could shift then how we look at how are we addressing the causes of suffering, and truly a line of centralized, decentralized, or functioning lines. So there are so many different terms that have been used. The decisions that are necessary to guide our societies to sustainable and thrivable regenerative development within planetary boundaries.
Romy, I had the feeling you wanted to say something.
I guess I have a comment on the general idea of collecting a lot of principles when you venture into a vast space of possible innovations. Most of the time, when you search in a vast space of possible innovations, you're looking for really big wins, and when you find a really big win, it's pretty easy to evaluate. You don't have to make subtle trade-offs between 5 different principles to figure out whether it's better. It's just pretty obviously better. We have such a huge space we're looking at here. That's what we should be doing, just looking for the really big wins.
What's a win?
I mean, in history so far, I would say, energy is a win, writing was a win,
Julia would say unconditional love.
computers were a win. There's a lot of pretty big wins so far in history, and we're looking for big wins like that we'll just look at the principles, we'll say we don't have to make fine judgments. Like, this is great. Let's do more of this. Search for great stuff.
Sharon?
Oh, I said that winning is actually allowing people to reach their full potential, and this is why we develop it.
David, please.
Yes.
David Orban, sorry for the few Davids.
Thank you. I think we are deluding ourselves that we can achieve our goal of imbuing beneficial AGI with principles that we can then recognize as desirable. The evolution of human ethical and moral systems has happened, but very slowly. It is only a few years that we recognize the slavery being wrong, and we were happy with it for thousands of years. We have a very small window of opportunity to take advantage of strong AI, which is not yet AGI, to accelerate our ethical understanding, and then use those tools to bridge us over to an AGI-based ethics that will be a superset of possibilities, like we just heard, but exploring that possibility space unaided will not happen rapidly enough. We are just too inefficient.
Yes, I think that's what Annalise mentioned. I mean, we don't have to expect happiness immediately. It's like we have to go through the rainforest to grow, and then yes. We have a question in the back from Trista Patterson, who is an expert in sustainability. Yes, Nami. Yeah.
I wanted to make a quick comment in response to those privileges because that's the obvious attractor for so many. But to reflect a moment on the concentration of power in our current systems and also the aim of decentralization, that instinct to see an obvious big win, and of course, why not? And we mobilize toward that, and that blinds us to the unintended consequences that oftentimes propagate over very long time periods. And it also disenfranchises those for whom their value systems haven't been represented in the identification of what is a win or not. It's particularly precarious in, as Anna Lois was pointing out, that association between happiness and materialism. And that's true at the basis of Max Neef's fundamentals of needs, but, and the very critical needs, and maybe that's true for the quick wins for basic needs, the elimination of hunger, starvation, peace. But when we think about the longer run challenges, the quick wins are not so obvious and they're not equitably represented. I wanted to point back to what our other panelist, the gentleman on the left, was saying about the 8 forms of capital. So very important for propagating happiness and benefits over time. Because oftentimes, I was reflecting on the greatest happiness for most. In a former life, I was with the US government as a research economist, and the definition for the US Forest Service was the greatest good for the greatest number of people in the longest run. And of course, forming a multi-factorial analysis on those 3 axes becomes enormously complex, but the instinctual definition in the American economy was to link that greatest good with material extraction. The Forest Service then inclined itself to maximum sustained yield, which sounds so great, but it led to the US Forest Service liquidating all of its old growth forests, 500 to 1,000-year-old trees for the price of a cheeseburger, because it would create the greatest good. And the idea was you build up the capital, you sell off all those resources, you invest it, and it grows over time. But it ignores all of those other forms of capital that the gentleman was pointing out. And I wanted to ask Anna Lois in the Constitution, and I think I recall a few references, but in the Constitution draft that you were showing, can you remind us the extent to which those other forms of capital are represented, or is there a need to be much more explicit about what those are and to counteract our biases that incline us toward materialism and extractionism? There was another point yesterday mentioned about the difference between AGI supporting
여기가 대부분이고 두 번째로 듣는 하이퍼사이클 세 번째가
Besides sustainability experts at a large US company, so it's amazing to have her with us. And so just before I was I just wanted to say, so actually to sum it up, yes, and this is I think what I wanted to convey also in my keynote, is it depends. If you are in Moloch, does not necessarily work very well for the planet in the long run. But I think, and I would think, and I will let Annalise answer, but I would like to have Robin's take, because my feeling is that Robin's economics, yes, and we had this discussion about the economics of the AGI, it's very pragmatic, and I want to know his opinion about this.
I said big win, not quick win. That's an important distinction. So I'm not saying to neglect the future. I'm almost the opposite. There are a lot of really big wins. I think that it's hard to get wins in the short term. We should really be pushing on to get those long-term wins. For example, in the Dow space, my horse in the race is futarchy. And I think there's huge potential for futarchy if only we can get smaller scale experiments working up on that. And again, I'm interested in the biggest win. So if you look back at all of human history, you should be able to identify some innovations that were just big wins overall for civilization. That we just wouldn't be willing at all to do without. And those are the things we should most celebrate in history, and there's a lot more of those to be found. So in the decentralized AGI space, let's just keep looking for the really big wins that will, when people look back centuries from now, they'll go, wow, I would have loved to be part of that because that just made a huge difference.
And we have, these are the last comments now, so I think this will be a good wrap for you, and all the others, there will be also your last comments because they showed me the time. The one who has a bill or anything. Sharon,
yeah, so may I add to the big win? So here, our society is diverse in different type of societies, so big win is constructed of small wins for different communities, different wins, and this is how we reach a better future for all of us.
Esther, and then was oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, it's okay.
I've forgotten the question. I'm sorry.
Okay. The question was, let me, sorry, I have to just shorten it very much. So, when we look at these principles, greatest happiness for most, it matters which culture do we come from, because the US has the same in its constitution and so on and so forth. So it's about having versus being. I think that's what I understood. What means happiness. So,
Yes, so as I was reflecting on these principles, including the greatest happiness for most, I had a couple of thoughts on it. One is that we're generally not very good at telling what makes us happy. I mean, you can ask somebody, what do you think makes you happy? But the answer that you give, people who study cognitive psychology have discovered that when they ask questions like that, what's important to you, or what makes you happy, or something like this, or even straightforward questions, more simple questions and practical questions about what they think about things. People don't actually know what they mean. They say something, but where is that answer really coming from? Is it what is genuinely important to them, or is it not? And that's why I think that one of the things perhaps that might be missing from the minimal ethical principles is the notion of self-reflection. That self-reflection is powerfully important in organizations. I think that in order for us really to evolve and for beneficial AGI to have a good birthplace, we are going to have to implement self-reflection at every single level.
Yeah, I think that's very you see that's conscious experience, so it's like that's what I understood from it. Okay. Annelux will have the last word. And please make also an invitation to the ethicals and the constitution which is related to this.
Yeah, so I'll answer it from the AGI constitution perspective on the matter of the sustainability. So in Article 6, cities outlined how AGI can help us to really map out the complexity of the sustainability crisis using a multi-capital approach, but also to help us become aware of the systemic blind spots of the externalities of our current economic models. In Article 9 of the Constitution, this is further worked out in a decentralized manner for a planetary regeneration protocol that can be implemented through smart contracts and blockchain technology to then monitor in the way that we are also utilizing our resources across planetary carrying capacity and social carrying capacities, which is really important. And that's a sustainability threshold approach, not just looking at emissions, plus there's also an article in the Constitution working with AGI to look at, for example, the resource transition of the energy transition. So there's a lot of thought in that. Yes.
Thank you so much, and please join us this afternoon if you want to talk more about this topic and about principles and the ethics of it all. Of course, 40 minutes or 20 minutes, how much we had, I don't know, is far not enough. This is just the beginning of the conversation. Thank you so much to all the panelists.